with SAIC, and I am so honored to bring up our next panelist for the building of CX into the IT modernization discussion. This panel will be moderated by the government co-chair for the summit, David Ellison, the Deputy Chief Program Officer of the Social Security Administration for IT Modernization. David is the Deputy Program Officer for SSA's IT Modernization effort, where he is responsible for delivering a portfolio of 35 products and a 5-year budget approaching $700 million. David previously served as a Product Development Director at IRS's Office of Online Services, where he led omni-channel rollout. Before the federal service, David worked at AOL, where he was responsible integrating new online products with contact center support. David also serves as a commander in the Navy Reserve, focused on military space capabilities and user integration. These roles give David a unique perspective in how IT modernization can best address customer needs. David and panelists, we are looking forward to your session, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, and thank you everyone in the audience for joining. We're very pleased to have so many here, and I think it's a testament to how important CX and also IT mod are in Fed space with agencies. And going back to our planning in earlier this year, February, we started planning today in earnest. What I wanted to get at with this panel is an understanding of how does CX fit relative to IT mod, right? Because they're parallel, both important efforts. What is the relationship between the two? And we've crafted this conversation today to address that. But I'm seeing that it's not just me wondering. Just 2 days ago, we got a press inquiry asking this question. I won't name where the outlet that asked, and if it's you, we'll have an answer to you soon. Just give us a moment. So the question is, how does digital transformation complement other initiatives such as IT mod, CX, and other initiatives? Are they one and the same, or are they distinct efforts? So it's really kind of other people wondering, well, how do these fit together? So our panelists today, we have Lauren from PenFed, we've got Ralph joining, who's the COO at HUD, thank you. We've got Elizabeth Norris from the Department of State, and from SSA we have Sean Broom. He's dual-hatted at SSA as our Deputy CIO and also the Chief Program Officer for IT Modernization at the SSA. So let's lead off finding out a little bit of information about these organizations. So let's go down the line and give a little information about your organization, your IT mod efforts, and give us some dimension on what you're having to tackle now. Lauren, with you.
So I'm Lauren Kessler. I'm with PenFed Credit Union. So we are a credit union, which for those of you who don't know, it's similar to a bank. We're a little bit smaller. We don't pay taxes, and we offer pretty good rates. So I run the, you may have recognized the visual. So I run the website, so penfed.org, the shopping experience. So we have about 20 million viewers coming to our site on a monthly basis. So it's a pretty high traffic organization, or pretty high traffic website. We have about 25 billion in assets. So I think one of our biggest IT initiatives this year was rolling out Salesforce. So taking a lot of disparate data sources and really combining it so that we can get a very holistic view across all the different lines of businesses and all the different marketing, and I'm part of the digital innovation team, so that we can get a really holistic view of our customers. I think that's probably our biggest initiative.
Great, thank you. Rob?
Hi, and I'm Ralph Gaines at U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We are a broad, large agency. We have a $52 billion budget, doing everything from a $26 billion program that helps individuals with rental assistance to what's in the news today, the disaster recovery. So we do a lot of work in disaster recovery, federal homeless program. So we're pretty broad-based. As it relates to our IT modernization, we've really kicked off a great program last September of the initial assessment phase. You've probably heard of the work on the Center of Excellence work going on, and we were the second agency after USDA. And so we're really incorporating the IT modernization in our entire strategic view. Very important that we do everything from a strategic standpoint. So IT modernization, culture, the whole 9 yards is being completely transformed in our agency.
Good morning, my name is Elizabeth Norris. I am part of the Passport Services team in the State Department. I'm going to talk a little bit about our structure so you can have an idea of how we are in different agencies and places, not only in the country but also overseas. We have 29 agencies and centers in the United States, and we do have more than 50 posts overseas. We provide services to U.S. citizens domestically and overseas. Our Bureau, the Consular Affairs Bureau, is creating a platform called Consular One. And within the platform, we have different projects going on. We have different initiatives also within passports. So the first project that we have in a pilot phase right now is the report of birth abroad. So this is a service that we provide to U.S. citizens overseas. So when you have a baby overseas, you can go and register your baby at the embassy as a U.S. citizen. So that's the first step kind of in our long process, providing that service. It's in a pilot phase right now. We have it in 6 countries. We have it in Canada, Mexico, France, Germany, and other two countries. And our next step will be the online passport renewal. And I know that some of you are customers, and a lot of people are waiting for that. I do have friends who ask me, why don't you have an online passport renewal? Why do I have to go to the post office if I just need to renew my passport? You have all of my information. So that will be our next step. Hopefully, we'll be able to implement that as a beta test and deploy that in the fall of 2020. So we are working on that, and there's so many aspects of that implementation. We're working on the customer experience, of course, not only externally but also internally. How is that going to affect our employees? So it's a big project. Other initiatives that we're working on within task force is push notifications. How can you, as a customer, get notifications of where your application is, because you're wondering, what is the status of my passport? Also, virtual assistant. How can you go into our website and you can get information without having to call someone, and the information is right there. You just ask the questions. Something similar to what USCIS already has. And we're also working on how to improve our acceptance facilities, because our network, yes, we have the passport agencies, but we also have those acceptance facilities where you go in post offices, city offices where you can go and apply for the passport. How can we improve that, and what is going to be the impact once we have our services online? Last year we issued, currently we have issued 14 million passports up to date in 2019. 2018 we issued 21 million passports. So we do have a big community to serve. That number includes also the overseas passports that we issue. So that's where we are right now with our modernization.
Good morning, everybody. Sean Broom from Social Security Administration. Given that we're talking about customer experience, I thought I'd introduce our effort based on our shared customers. Our customers are your customers, the 329 million Americans that come to you for information services, employment, etc. Many people know us from retirement insurance benefits, but before that, they get a Social Security number, usually at birth or when they enter the country. They pay Federal Insurance Contribution Act taxes, and so they have an ongoing relationship with us, as they do with you, whether you're in the commercial sector or in government. Our modernization program is almost at the 2-year mark. Published the plan in October 2017. Its core focus is replacing, retiring our oldest legacy systems. They serve our core mission, those missions that I just mentioned. Issuance of Social Security numbers and verification of those numbers for a variety of business purposes. Payment of old age survivors and disability insurance benefits, and payment of supplemental security income benefits for, that's a needs-based program, Title 16 of the Social Security Act. So whether you are a beneficiary, a family member, or a client who helps beneficiaries, a reporter of FICA, you are probably somebody that has interacted with the Social Security Administration. So our customers are you, your colleagues, your family members, your dependents.
Sean, thank you. So central to CX is customer and knowing who your customer is. And I think most, certainly large organizations, have many types of customers. Of our 4 organizations represented here, Lauren, I think PenFed's different in that you have to go find your customers. I know that in the concourse of the Pentagon, there are at least 2 other banks available, and you're competing with them. Whereas in agencies, customers come to us and we service them. However, we also have internal customers, our employees, where much of our modernization effort is focused. Can you give a little more color on who your customers are, and then related, how do you balance your IT mod focus for the public customer versus your employees?
So I think being in the private sector, you're it's a free market, you're competing with everybody. So, most of our customers looking for, whether it be a mortgage or whether it be a credit card, they're always going to start with Google. So I think nailing down, specific personas has been, that's been a challenge. And I'd say our suite of personas for exterior users versus internal users are drastically different. Finding that balance between, if we're focused on serving the external customers and delivering the information that they are truly looking for when they're, at the early stages of shopping for a mortgage per se, versus, there's a big initiative to reduce, the amount of time for calls, make the call centers more efficient. When somebody actually does call in, making that exercise easier for the, customer service representatives, and taking a look at what information they're kind of gathering. So I think right now for the sales force specifically, a lot of our focus is on creating a faster, easier to use experience for our call center service representatives. That's our main focus. And I think I work a little bit more on the marketing side of trying to discover, what are people actually coming to our website for? Are they power users? Are they just, going to check the rates every couple weeks and they're looking at 15 other sites with 15 other tabs open? Are these people who are, loyal PenFed members? They have, 5 or 6 different products with us. And it's really about, targeting them with the right message at the right time. So striking that balance of really it being a platform of having to attract and make it easy to use for both internal users and external users is something we're always trying to strike a balance with.
Great, thank you. And Ralph, how do you balance internal versus external customers?
Well, let me just take it back to the initial, because it's a great question. We really had to understand who our customers are. When I first asked that question, it was a really difficult answer for a lot of people. Everyone had a different view. Who is the customer out there? We have 5 million families that rely on us for rental assistance. We have 17,000 apartment buildings, private, that work with us to provide 1.2 million citizens with vouchers. We have 650,000 first-time home buyers that are part of our FHA program. There are a lot of moving parts. We have thousands of homeless people that we try to get into our homeless management system, and we've got a countless amount of people recovering from disasters. Where do they go? Is there a central place they go to get help? So when you ask those questions, you start getting deep on it, and then you have to take a look and say, well, what are the examples of what they go through? What is their experience? And one thing we've done recently is, we took an elderly population and we did a journey map. We said, what are all different points? What are the linear points along the line? Because maybe there's a journey that they go through that we can apply to other areas of HUD. So the second part of your question was how do we balance it internally and externally? But we're really going through that, just knowing that all customers are equally important, right? I mean, in our agency, we have over 7,500 employees. I consider those customers, okay? That is our culture that we rely on to deliver effectively to these people. So we have to pay attention to them as much as anybody else. So we have the alignment of mission and everything else. So it's really sort of this multifaceted approach. We're at sort of in early stages and a lot of understanding of where we're headed, but we're definitely coordinating all the information and moving towards setting up an entire office for customer experience.
Great. So Elizabeth, passport services is maybe even more complicated because you have state employees, you have the customer, those seeking passport services, but at least in the U.S., you have an affiliate relationship with the Postal Service, which are other customers. They handle much of the retail operation for your processes. How do you manage these together?
So for us, the main thing that we've been doing is including everyone. So in regards to our external customers, we did something similar. Journey mapping, we created personas. We thought about with the current data that we have, we thought about the services that we provide right now. So for example, if it is a business professional who's gonna apply for the passport, their experience will be totally different to someone who just naturalized and they need the passport to just maybe go and make the first trip with the U.S. passport to their homeland. So we created a lot of personas based on the data that we already have. And we were thinking about what is the best way that we can develop this system so we can service this specific customer. Internally, we have, as you said, we have adjudicators, we have managers in our field offices and overseas. We have different roles and responsibilities with our employees. So we did something similar. We went into looking at what type of employees we have, what their needs are. And something that we did actually all last year, we traveled around the country and we went to the 29 agencies to get feedback from those employees and asking them what are your needs, what is it that you want to see, showing them what we developed so far and getting feedback from them, right? Like they would say, oh, why don't you move this way, or this is something that will be very useful for us. So we actually went to 29 agencies and we got hundreds of feedback from all of our employees. So they feel included in the process and they feel that we're building something that is going to be useful for them also. So including everyone and communicating with everyone, we do have a specific office in headquarters and some agents around the country who visit those acceptance facilities. So also including that office and talking to them about their needs, talking to them about what they want or what they would like to see in the future and how we can include them in that process that we're going to hopefully have in the future, where we're going to be getting applications online so the customer won't have to go to the acceptance facility, but there are some services for customers that still have to go to the acceptance facility. So how can we include that in our process and also talk about digitization of the documents in the future? So that's what we've been doing so far. Part of the planning is including everyone and making sure that everyone is informed and we're getting feedback from everyone.
And Sean, how is SSA balancing the employee as a customer versus the public number holder?
Sure, and David, as you know, we've identified approximately 24 modern IT products to serve our diverse customer base. For each of those products, we have multiple personas, which include the employee persona, as well as either the public or business partner persona that utilizes that particular business function. At the heart of our development, the subtitle of our modernization plan is a business and IT journey. So clearly we have a focus on serving our internal customers, those employees who day to day serve the American public and our business partners. They serve them through field office contacts. We have a distributed network of 1,300 field offices, hearing offices across the nation. Other than postal and probably IRS, we have the highest frequency of day-to-day contact with John Q. Public or Jane Q. Public. But beyond that, we have lots of ongoing contact with other federal, state, and local agencies that rely on our data or for whom they provide us data to administer our programs. So I think Anahita said it earlier, we believe that happy, productive, engaged, empowered employees provide better customer experience. And so as we have begun our journey, focusing on retiring, replacing, modernizing our oldest legacy IT systems, which were built in an arena in which face-to-face service was the predominant mode of interaction. And in a time when people did not have access to information in their palm 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, we have a lot of, opportunity to improve that experience for our employees. And that then translates to opportunity to then transform how we deliver service. We're trying to change the way we do business to both respond to customer preferences as well as to deliver service more efficiently.
So IT Mod as is more than a concept at many agencies, SSA being an example. The IRS published in April their modernization plan. So these are formal investments registered with OMB for oversight. Sean, when the SSA IT Mod plan was constructed, so 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, how was CX considered? How did that affect, if at all, the formulation of that plan?
Yeah, Dave, great question, and really gets to the heart of our conversation this morning. And as I said in my opening, we believe the customer must be at the center of everything we do. And so that relates to those personas and journey maps that were discussed in the last GSA panel, but it also relates to having technical expertise in that customer experience arena. So from the start, with our modernization plan, we developed our skill set on customer experience, evolved our prior work that really focused on user-centered design into design thinking, the broader concept, and then into customer experience improvement. And on every one of our modern products, I mentioned we have about 24 modern products, a customer experience professional is on the team from the start. And sometimes they serve more than one product based on their expertise. But at the time where we're identifying where's the problem, opportunity, or need that we're trying to address, we have a cross-discipline team that always includes a customer experience professional. And their job is to maintain the team's focus on who are we serving and how do we serve them better. Obviously, there are many competing interests in that dialogue. What does our technical requirement, what is the business need to actually complete this transaction? But those should be viewed in context of what's the customer's primary objective and how do we exceed their expectations.
So Elizabeth and Ralph, for HUD and state, I don't know whether your IT Mod plans are as formalized as some of the other agencies. If so, how is CX influencing how those plans are developed?
Okay, well, I'll start. Probably not as formalized. I mean, we really got underway, I guess, last summer related to our work with our Center of Excellence. But one thing we are doing is, we have 3 strategic goals for the organization. One is advancing economic opportunity. One is protecting the taxpayer, and one is creating operational efficiencies, of which IT modernization falls in there. And everything has to be very aligned, very integrated in everything we do. So, we're setting up an entire office for customer experience. And the critical part of this, I think, is from a leadership standpoint, we've been out in the forefront saying, this is one of the most important things we can do as an organization, not only affecting our clients on the outside, but affecting our internal organizations on the inside. That's going to take an organizational redesign. It's going to take leadership with new senior customer service officer. It's going to take a new director of our contact center. So we are doing something in our agency that, at least for ourselves, is very transformational, and it's driving our entire process. And I think it starts with leadership. Our secretary has been very supportive of it, and then it's going to be up to us to make sure that we really clearly communicate internally what we're doing, and then the role that everybody has to play in that, so that there's sort of this groundswell of support and understanding, and that's going to help us execute it at the highest level.
So pulling the thread on that a little more, so CX as a perspective or discipline is relatively new. How did you sell your seniors on the need for it and that there was a gap to be filled?
I think we had the lowest rating on the survey on customer experience. It's funny, but before I took on this role about a year ago as COO of HUD, I was appointed, I was the principal deputy assistant secretary in the program office and called community planning and development. So when you consider the community block grant programs, the federal homeless programs, disaster recovery, to name just a few, that was an area that I was helping lead. And when I came to Washington, having been in the private sector, I was unfamiliar with sort of this customer base and trying to understand. The first thing I did is, I can't get it here. I got to go out there, meet with the grantees, meet with the recipients, meet with the citizens, and I learned an awful lot, from that. So, from that we now moving into having that experience and moving into the COO role, we're able to kind of formulate these new offices and these new processes to make it all work at the customer experience level.
Perfect. And Elizabeth, how far along is IT modernization as an initiative? How far along is it at state?
So, with Control One and building Control One, we just have basically right now working in two projects. Two of the first, which is the Control Procure abroad that we already have in a pilot phase, and then the online passport renewal. For us, customer experience is also new to the organization, and we do have leadership support, and they do understand the need and the part of the customer experience. For example, one of the initiatives that we have is push notification, and for us to move that forward, when we brief up our leadership, we have to help them understand the benefits and efficiencies that we were going to gain, and also the benefits that the customer was going to gain with this specific process. So customer experience, we have a very efficient process, the paper process. So it's kind of the opposite of what you mentioned. I mean, it's a challenge of saying we need this, even though we have a very efficient process, right? So the challenges is bigger actually, because you go to your leadership and you mention these are the benefits that we're going to gain. But also think about the customers, what they're used to now, what the customers are demanding now. So our plans are, it's a 10-year project. The Consular One project it's a 10-year project. It's gonna basically include all the services, and hopefully at some point we're gonna be like SSA. Or all of our services online. So that's basically where we are right now.
Perfect. I want to go back to Laura. And so you mentioned earlier about how some of your products are made available online. We know that you have, especially in the Beltway area, got a number of physical offices. You're present in the Pentagon, of course, as your name would suggest. What's the channel perspective with PenFed CX? Are you segmenting your audiences and your customer base to one channel or another? Are you deliberately managing transactions across all of your channels? What is your perspective there?
To be honest, I wish we were a little bit further along. I think we as an organization came to kind of a realization when we realized that 96% of our revenue flows through digital channels, which is huge. And I would say who owns what digital channels, it still kind of remains to be seen. But as of last year, we, for the first time, had NPS on our corporate scorecard. So whether anybody got a bonus all of a sudden became based on how do our customers feel about us, which was a huge change for us culturally. I think with regards to, we're making incremental changes. Like now I sit really between the digital team that runs the website and marketing. So, we're able to do a little bit more of an omni-channel experience. But again, a bank is kind of like a credit union, sort of like several different organizations under one umbrella. We have mortgages. It's a completely different business model than a credit card per se. So creating a journey, I did a service design blueprint for mortgages. It's amazing how little overlap there was with, say, what it's like to search for a credit card. And what was neat about doing that was it really brought all of the different stakeholders to the table. So that's mortgage operations, mortgage the business, it's the underwriters, it's the mortgage advisors, it's marketing, it's everybody. And I was a little nervous to do it because my focus is mostly kind of the front stage, right? So it's the website. But getting everybody together to see what, the mortgage journey of an actual mortgage, when somebody hits apply, what system is it going into, who's touching it, how long does it take to get into the next system, oh, there's errors, it has to go back here. And once you start putting a timeline on it, it really brought everybody to the table. I think we've struggled in that, a service design blueprint, it's a living and breathing thing. There's always things that are changing. I think the one that I made several months ago was already out of date in many ways. So for me, one of the things that I'm trying to do is work with our data officer to create kind of like almost like a metrics that kind of feed into that design blueprint so that we can look at, okay, we rolled out a new application system for the mortgage for customer facing, on Blend. Why is it that our application completes are actually going down? And going back out and saying, okay, well, we put in this new technology, we increased our tech stack, but yet we're not seeing improvements. So that's kind of where we're at. It's going to be, line of business by line of business, and I'm hoping that, maybe at the end of the year we can actually look at a whole customer journey and start to find correlations between, product lines and get a better sense of like a customer lifetime value.
Great, thank you. So my observation in two agencies has been that at least the federal agencies are trying to rebalance what we build versus what we buy. And I have, it seems like CX can influence a procurement approach and then also the way that we architect our solutions. Where we have siloed transactions, it's very easy to create verticals, which ultimately is not great for a customer who is not especially interested in how we organize internally. They have work to do with the IRS, they have work to do with HUD, they have work to do with state and the SSA, and they simply want to get it done with as little repeating and starting from scratch as possible. So my question for the feds is, how does a CX perspective influence how you procure if you're doing more with COTS and platforms, and then also how you architect your solutions. Rome?
How does it influence procurement? Well, again, I sort of get back to you have to have the first ground level understanding of where you are, right? And then from a procurement standpoint, you just have to make, I think you really need to look at the value add on the outside and make sure that everything you're bringing in is completely aligned with whether it's all your program offices or your processes, going forward, and take a look at what your existing procurement has been. In our case, that's a whole area that we're focused on inside of our streamline of operations to improve, right? So, that has its own leadership area. So we want to make sure that our leadership as it relates to IT modernization, transformation, everything we're doing from the ground up is communicated well through that group, and that we align those groups as we go to the outside.
Great.
So the big challenge for us is integration of legacy systems. And that is the goal of Consular One, is basically bring all of the systems that we have to be one system. Not only do we have passport services, but we also have visas. And that is part of the same bureau. So as Sean mentioned, we're looking at what we have, what we need, and what we need to use. Our IT specialists are looking at modern technology that we can use that is going to be sustainable in the future because of all the data that we have to include. But also thinking about how we're going to be able to build something that is going to be user-friendly, something that is going to, connect between all the data that we have. And I also use my example. So I'm originally from Honduras. At some point, I had a non-immigrant visa in my life, and then I had an immigrant visa, and then I had a naturalization certificate, and then I had a passport. And all of these services, sometimes I have to produce the same documentation. So it's like you have all of my information, right? So looking at technology that we can use that can help us share data within consular affairs and also with other agencies, so the customer can have a better service. The customer can have a better time, when they submit the application. And you don't have to be, we have access to that information. So you don't have to be looking as a customer for all of this information, because at some point we already identified you. At some point we already saw your birth certificate. So why do you have to produce it again?
And Sean at SSA?
Sure. From the architecture, software engineering point of view, the primary driver that we see from customer experience is data integration. Elizabeth just mentioned that. Many of our business processes have evolved over time. They are siloed data stores. We keep redundant data. Anytime you keep redundant data, you have data discrepancies. Anytime, in our case, we have data discrepancies, it usually leads to poor service and payment error, two things we try to avoid. So data integration is the foundation from an architecture point of view. And then as far as the procurement point of view, the question to us is, the American public is used to what they see on their personal device and on the websites they visit for non-government business, whether it be securing a loan or buying something or sharing information about themselves and their family. Those services are commercial products. If that's what the standard is, the question is, how can we leverage that to complete our mission? And so we are looking, our approach is as dictated by federal policy, cloud smart, and COTS first, which is a big adjustment for us. When we engineered our systems, because of the scope of our responsibilities and the scale of our customer base, we relied on in-house development. We refined it with in-house development. and now taking an approach, well, here's what the customer expects because that's what they use outside of their SSA business. How do we use that software that's in the commercial marketplace in our enterprise? That becomes then, specificity on business requirements. A lot of conversation about security. Security is our middle name. It's the foundation of everything we do relative to protection of personally identifiable information. It builds the trust that was mentioned in the GSA panel for a customer to have a positive experience. And so it hasn't been easy for us. We're looking to walk before we run and run before we sprint. And so we're looking at instances where we can take commercial offerings and apply them in very discrete business cases all the way through the full customer journey, as was just mentioned, which seems intuitive, but when you're talking internal to a government bureaucracy, it's one customer, but it might be 8 different offices that have a play on that customer. So really having that interdisciplinary approach and that discipline throughout the process between the discovery of problem, opportunities, needs, the buying of software to meet those problems, opportunities, and needs, and deploying of that solution, keeping that customer at the front of all those different interest parties inside the agency that are driving, I need this, I need that. Policy says this, legal says that. Chief Information Security Officer says, I gotta have this. You can't do any of that you just talked about because I gotta have this right up front. And those problems can be resolved in the customer's favor. It takes a lot of dialogue and a lot of not only leadership from the top, but a lot of commitment to hearing the customer and doing what the customer asks for.
Sean, thank you. You mentioned the importance of security, and just by coincidence, with state and SSA present today, if you ask the man or the woman on the street, what do these agencies do for you? What is a passport good for, right? What you might hear back is a description of, well, it allows a citizen to travel in a mutually agreed manner to other
Opens your
countries.
doors to the world.
Exactly. Right. The passport, the physical passport just gets you there, right? With SSA, if you ask, well, what does SSA do? They'll generally describe something that is the Title II benefits retirement program. Disability is also there, of course. A co-product or a byproduct at both agencies is a credential. Right, at the SSA is the Social Security card and number, and you have the physical passport with the state passport services. So in CX, there's a tension between the security required to credential and also the convenience that the customer wants. How do your agencies manage that balance of those competing aims?
Like Sean mentioned, that is why it's taking us some time, because we want to make sure that we are providing an efficient product with the customer expectations and security. And that's why our process is so complex, because we need to make sure that the person who's in front of us is the person that they say they are. So that's the reason why actually we decided to start small in regards to online services. And it started with passport renewals. These are people that already applied before. These are people we already identified before. These are people that we already have their information. And then after we deploy this service, based on the feedback that we get from the customers and also our employees, we're gonna decide what is gonna be next. And how we can keep that information secure. But going back to my example that I always offer, if I've been identified by the State Department, right, even though I'm a first-time U.S. passport applicant, you already have my information. So how can we service those customers who either have been identified by another agency like USCIS or our State Department overseas, and make that faster process for them, and then have to go through the same steps that someone who's never been identified before goes through. So those are things that we are always keeping in mind in our planning. Going to happen eventually, I will just move it slowly because of the security.
Thank you. And Sean, how are security and convenience balanced at SSA?
It's a tricky balance day to day, product by product, customer by customer. We view it as the customer at the center of a three-edged triangle. Service, security, and stewardship, that is doing right by the taxpayer, doing it the most efficient way possible. And the calculus for individual transactions varies based on input from the chief information officer, the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer, the chief customer experience officer, which we don't have one yet. But it's not all about the chiefs, it's about the customer. And having perspective in the dialogue of those who use the software or those who use the service is critically important, as I mentioned previously, in each step of the way. When we plan, when we buy or build, when we deploy, we want to check back with the customer. So some of the things we do, David, are we share our journey maps broadly. GSA mentioned this as a practice. We also we're trying to get better at rapid prototyping. We heard this. Here's what we think it looks like. Is that right? To the actual customer. Not the uppers, to the actual customer. And then if it's not right, stopping and correcting it before we deploy it. That conversation goes well, I think better actually, when we have the customer in the room and we have all the other, I mentioned previously, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. So it's better if the chief information security officer hears the customer's feedback directly. That lock is too darn tight, I can't get through it. That helps us make changes. Likewise, legal, policy, our operational folks, it's good for them to be in that interaction. And I'm not just talking about usability testing per se. I'm talking about as we build the journey map. It's important for those folks from multidisciplinary departments to sit and hear and experience and learn and translate from their perspective. That way we're closer to having a joined up perspective as we get closer to the deployment.
Great, thank you. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I've got one more question and then we'll go to the audience. Ralph mentioned HUD has a customer service officer. Sean, you mentioned
We're in the process of getting one, right?
on the way. And SSA is maturing the CX discipline and function. For any of the panelists, where do you see CX fitting in your organization to take root and to be most effective? How do you organize around this?
I think what's neat about being in the private sector is that there's fast, cheap, or good, and fast is almost always a priority for us. So we have done a lot of changes and done a lot of tests and learn. So I initially sat in marketing and then moved into IT. And now we have a chief digital officer that sits a lot closer to the decision makers. And I think that's a really crucial move. Just because we are horizontal, we are cost recoverable. So, we offer services to the product lines. We don't have a budget of our own. So, that entire mortgage journey map, which was a few months long, and that was all built to mortgages. But another thing that we've tried that I think has been really successful, it kind of echoes what Sean said, it's about having the right people in the room. So a good learning lesson that we had was, Blend, it was, it's a mortgage application. We have our website, I have all that data, and then almost all of our applications go into a third-party vendor. So Blend would be our third-party customer-facing vendor. And then it goes, full credit, whatever, and then it goes into our database. Being able to kind of thread that information all the way through all the way to funding is near next to impossible. And so from a procurement perspective, having everybody in the room is definitely been a hard lesson to learn. Kind of going blind after, they exit my website and then it happens, they go through the application, we have some stats on that. That's been a challenge for us, but something that we tried that I think was very helpful was doing kind of these digital war rooms. So getting, compliance is very strict with us, or the PII, so getting, compliance officer, getting, IT, getting an actual engineer boots on the ground who actually has to implement it, getting everybody kind of in the room and discussing different options, and talking about the customer journey, and having, those different stakeholders actually be part of the problem solving, has been really, really effective and has helped us move a lot faster.
Lauren, thank you. We've got just a few minutes left. I think we can take a couple of questions. We have a mic in the back. And put your hand up, please. Go ahead, please.
I have a question for Sean. How have you been able to leverage the IT modernization effort to affect the backlog of disability cases in the agency?
Excellent question. So for the first part, how do we use IT Mod to affect the backlog of disability cases? So our disability processing system is one of our 3 oldest legacy systems. There are tremendous efforts to improve our efficiency, but also, which helps us process more cases, but also do it in a customer-focused way. So what we're doing is re-engineering the business process first, and then applying more modern technology to it. And this allows us to, for example, obtain evidence in a different way. It adds time, and therefore adds to the backlog when the evidence comes in by paper via the U.S. mail. Or by paper, somebody dropping it physically at our field office or hearing office. We're also analyzing that evidence in different ways. We're using artificial intelligence and machine learning tools to pick up data in the electronic folder for a disability claimant that allows us to both manage the workload and make a better decision. We're also at the end of the process and really throughout trying to build in quality checks by comparing in an automated fashion what policy requires and what our technician decided. Do they match? If they don't match, immediately flagging to the technician via our interface, hey, by the way, there might be a policy issue here. Double check it before you finalize this case. So it boils down to more efficient processing, automated delivery of evidence, and artificial intelligence decision support to help process that evidence.
Looks like in the center of the room.
Yes, hello. Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. My name is Maria Zamrai from Deloitte Consulting, and my question is for Elizabeth Morris. Elizabeth, you spoke about how you went out to your 29 field offices to gather data on their customer experience. Can you please talk about the difference between the data you collected at headquarters as opposed to the field offices? Was it different? Did you see any major discrepancies? And what kind of value did that bring to your cost?
Yes, so the data that we collected at our agencies was more on the process, so it's more on the day-to-day work and how the policies that we actually develop at headquarters will affect our employees. So it was actually a very good learning time for our offices and headquarters because sometimes we're so separated, right? I mean, someone in DC and then someone in San Francisco, the other way over the other side of the country. It helped our communication because now we have a better understanding of the needs of our agencies, and we'll be working on our policies around that. around exactly, because sometimes you write the policy or you do the training, but actually the day-to-day work is very different to what you have in your policy and your training. So that helped a lot.
So we have time for, I think, 2 more questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we've heard a lot about what you're doing to catch up to the commercial sector. Are you doing anything for future proofing or to look at emerging trends in CX?
I'll jump in since you have identified a topic that obviously stretches our thinking. I have, our colleagues from Social Security that work day to day in the customer experience arena. I think the customer will tell you what's future-proof or not. Certainly, there's an element when we're talking about technology modernization where technology reframes what's the art of the possible. But when we talk to the American public, there's a lot of diversity. And what works for one segment of the customer base may not be palatable or even tolerable to another segment of the customer base. So we try to look forward as far as not having to redo things every 2-3 years. But we also try to make sure that new efforts, new technology is normalized a bit before we adopt it at the enterprise level. The fail-safe, I think, for us has been when we show before production, here's what we're doing. And we usually do that in multiple settings. We do that with individual customers in focus group type of environment. We do that with customer advocates. We do that with other stakeholders. Some of them may be, overseers. Some of them may be appropriators, so that we can not surprise people, which we have found is pretty much a surefire indicator of not good service. And so showing it in advance, responding to feedback, incorporating suggestions, those are things that help us future-proof.
I'd add to that being a late mover isn't always a bad thing, because many of the capabilities that we need have been productized and are available to buy or rent, whereas if you're the first one with the idea, you pretty well have to build it yourself. So that's a responsibility that we're no longer prepared to take on in every case. So being able to access a marketplace of mature products that meet our needs, whether for communications or case tools or other functions, it's not a terrible place to be. Of course, people would like us to get there sooner, but we're on the right path. So I think we're at time. I'd like to thank our panelists again, Sean, Elizabeth, Ralph, and Lauren. Thank you all.